All right, my name is Adrian. I was born in Texcoco, raised in Texcoco, grew up in Texcoco, and then I came up to study Bible college in Moberly, and that's where I met Terry. And well, there's lots of stories that we could share, but I'll save those stories for later on maybe on a private message. We can share those. I don't want to make a lot of stories made known public because he probably has some other ones of mine. So I really appreciated Terry a lot during the years, and not so much when we were roommates, but just the different things we did together was really cool, and we really appreciated having him down there in earlier this year for the seminar that we had for our Evangelists. And I would like for you guys to watch a video. It's an overall video of what Southern Mexico Missions is, and then I'll go into depth as to what each evangelist does and how is it that we work in Southern Mexico.
We at Southern Mexico Missions empower new church plants, Christians to experience deeper spirituality, leaders for service, hurting people to find hope and healing, and community transformation. At Southern Mexico Missions, we empower people to live for Christ. Together, we empower new church plants, which start as home Bible studies. As these studies grow, they become house churches, which then develop into full self-supporting congregations. Southern Mexico Missions also empowers people to grow and mature spiritually in Christ. We accomplish this through individual and group discipleship, home Bible studies where individuals learn to study the Bible on their own, and we also partner with local camps and conferences to encourage life transformation, all leading to deeper spirituality. Another way that Southern Mexico Missions empowers is by training leaders for service. We offer seminars that provide biblical training and spiritual refreshment for all of our leaders. Our experienced leaders train new leaders, empowering them to serve in their communities. Women counsel, mentor, and offer support to other women. In doing so, we enable church members to take on leadership roles within their local congregations. Hurting people find hope and healing in a broken world through the truth of God's Word in their lives. We provide biblical counseling, which empowers people to grow closer to God and to each other. Our Healing for the Wounded Heart program allows women to overcome past, present, and future wounds in their lives through the teaching of biblical principles. Through the efforts of Southern Mexico Missions, people are finding the healing message of Jesus Christ. Communities are being transformed in Southern Mexico through our evangelistic efforts that include introducing the gospel in new communities through vacation Bible schools and community service projects, thus spreading the saving gospel of Jesus Christ. Your financial and prayerful support empowers our team at Southern Mexico Missions to help people live for Christ.
All right, so we'll go to our slideshow presentation. A little bit of history of where Southern Mexico Missions begun, or how Southern Mexico Missions started, was back in 1957, my grandparents moved from California down to Mexico City to start church plants there. In 1957, the deepest or the most of any of our missionaries that had gone into Mexico had gone in about 6 hours into Mexico. And so Mexico City at that time was about 17 hours driving distance from the closest border. So they were really pioneers going into Mexico City and the southern states of Mexico as far as starting churches, Christian churches or churches of Christ in that area, or independent Christian churches. And so when they first moved down there, they went down with my mom, which was a year and a half old, and my uncles, which were 4.5 years old. They were from California. My grandma was from Northern California. My grandpa was from Southern California. But they met while my grandma was going to Bible college in San Jose Bible College up in, I don't know, close. It's more northern than it is southern. And then they got married, and then they decided they would serve in Mexico. They wanted to start church plants in Mexico City area. There was 3.5 million people in Mexico City at that time. Currently, Mexico City has a little over 32 million people, and so there's a lot of work to be done. While Grandpa was starting Bible studies in their apartment where they were renting, people would walk by on the street, and they'd leave the door open, so they'd be singing. People would walk in and kind of want to know what's going on. And they would sit down and hear the message, hear a Bible study, hear some words, and then they'd be excited about it, and they would want him to go to his parents or to some family members to tell them about this message that he was sharing. And my grandpa, sure, well, let's hop in the car and let's go. And they're like, well, my family lives 17 hours away from here. My family lives 11 hours away from here, 9 hours. And so that's how the ministry got going to the different states in Mexico. In Mexico, we have 32 states. And so Grandpa started going to Veracruz. He started going to Oaxaca. He started going to Puebla. He just started going different places wherever God was calling him at the moment. And that's one of the things that I've learned from hanging out with Grandpa is that when you do something for God, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan, and then you need to start going towards that plan. And during that time, you need to be listening to God. Because a lot of times our plans are really good, but they're not God's plans. But our plans are good to get us going, to get us moving. Because a lot of times I think in our mission or in our way of doing things for God, we just kind of sit there until God moves us. And we're like, well, I know God has a plan for me, so I'm just going to wait because I don't really want to make a mistake. So I'll just sit here and wait for God to tell me what his plan is. And we just sit there as Christians. And we sit and we sit and we sit. And guess what? God's not going to do it that way. We need to start moving, and then God will start tugging us or pushing us a little towards the area where he wants us to go. But we need to actually start doing that. And their goal was to go and establish churches in Mexico City area. Where they had the biggest growth was outside of the Mexico City area, in all these little different towns. Grandpa would have to ride in a bus for 11 hours, sometimes standing room only, with like live chickens and, I mean, just old beat up buses. And he said sometimes they would just sleep against each other. You know, the bus was so full, boxes full of stuff everywhere. I mean, he said it was smelly, sweaty, and they would just like hold on to the rail and kind of sleep all the way through. It's at 11 hours, 9 hours, sometimes up to even 14 hours in these bus rides. And sometimes you wonder, well, why would you do this? You know, why would you go through all of this just to take the word of God to people? Well, when you get to those towns, when you see those people and the gratitude that they have because of what has happened through the word of God in their community, you realize the importance of it. I'm just glad I don't have to do that anymore. I'm glad that my grandparents actually did a lot of the work that has been done, and so I get to continue the work that they started. And currently, Southern Mexico Missions has 9 evangelists. We've had anywhere from 3 evangelists up to 12 evangelists in the past, and it just kind of they come and go, you know. Some of them decide that after 19 years of evangelism and working for Southern Mexico Missions, they want to try something new. We've lost others because of persecution, and some others just natural death or a sickness. And so we've had a lot to deal with at Southern Mexico Missions. When my grandparents moved down, they were supported by one church. That's called a Living Link Support. And so they didn't have to come up to the States quite often. Actually, they would come up probably every 4 years, every 6 years to give a report. They would communicate with the elders of that church, and they received a salary. They were considered the ministers of the First Christian Church in Inglewood, California, in Mexico. And that's how they were known. They were their ministers in Mexico. And in 1990, between 1990 and 1992, they had some financial problems. The church was no longer able to support them fully. And so Grandpa thought maybe this is the end of it. I'm done, and maybe this is the way God is trying to tell me that I should find something else to do. And the preacher at that time said, well, why don't we start a nonprofit? And then we can go to different churches and ask for support. So they did. They started what is now called Southern Mexico Missions, which was established in 1992. And we have a board, and we're a 50c3 or whatever, that 501c3 in California. That's where most of our board members were. And so that's where our mission was established. And so we'll go to the next slide, and I'd like to share with you about our evangelists. What Southern Mexico Missions basically does is help support these evangelists and their families so they don't have to go find jobs somewhere else to do God's work. So they can dedicate themselves 100% of their time to minister to people, to share with people, and not have to worry about how are they going to pay for college for their kids, how are they going to feed their families, or if there is enough. Because we've gone into different areas, and some of these evangelists, that's the way Grandpa found them. They were already doing the work of an evangelist, but they were having to work this and this and this, and so their job as an evangelist wasn't as successful. And so when Grandpa would come in, some of these men Grandpa trained, some of these men went to Bible college, and they went back to their hometowns to continue to spread the gospel. And so this is a picture of our seminar where Terry was just recently, the beginning of the year. And from the right to the left, we have Eustacio. Him and Rodo are in the state of Oaxaca. And then it's Tacho, Rodo, then Kurt, then Rudy. We have two Rodolfos, so one is Rodo and the other one is Rudy. And then we have Jose, we have Aldo, and then the one in green, that's me. And so we'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about each one, and then at the end, if you guys have any questions, we'll go through those. When do I need to be done by? Okay, all right. So Aldo is in Chiapas. Chiapas is the southernmost state in Mexico. If you look at Mexico map, this is the U.S. up here, and then Mexico. Chiapas is the last state in Mexico, at the tail end of Mexico. It borders with Guatemala. He is about 7 hours away from the border, so he doesn't live on a border town. All border towns are pretty nasty, whether it's on the south side or on the north side of our country. But Aldo works, his home base is Tuxtla Gutierrez, which is the capital of Chiapas. And that's where the church plant is. Or the biggest, not the biggest, it's the main church plant. That's where it all started. And what happens is each one of our evangelists either goes into an area where there's a main church, and then he goes around and circuit rides the area looking for home Bible studies or starting new churches 2 or 3 hours away, an hour and a half away, 45 minutes away in the different towns there is. And Aldo, actually the way he ministers, each evangelist ministers in a different way, or we do our job as an evangelist in different ways. Aldo, what he does is they do a lot of service projects, community service projects. And so if somebody needs a wall or somebody needs a tin roof put up, they'll get together as a church and go help that person. And that opens an opportunity for them to share Christ with them. If they need a hole dug, they'll go in and dig the hole for them. One time, there was this one guy who got in an accident and broke his arm and his arm and his leg, and he was a farmer, and he had some crops he needed to harvest, and there was about 2-week window period that he had to harvest it or he was going to lose it all. And of course, he wasn't going to be able to do it because he had his arm and his leg broken. And so the church got together. There was like 3 different congregations that got together. They went out, and what usually takes about 12 weeks or 2 weeks for this guy to harvest, it took them 2 hours. Aldo said each one grabbed a row. They went on a row picking on the way up and a row picking on the way back, and they were done within 2 hours. And the family that they picked for was really, really excited, and that opened up an opportunity. That family now it's coming to church. And it's in Nuevo León where this happened. Nuevo León is, I have to say that Chiapas and Oaxaca are the two most dangerous states that we have as far as persecution is concerned. At one point, while I was in Bible college, Aldo and another guy had been going to evangelize this town called Nuevo León, which is the fourth one on the list. And the priest, the Catholic priest there in that town, told the people to watch out for them because they were coming in to preach the gospel, but they were actually going to eat their children. And so, of course, for us, that's like ridiculous. It sounds kind of funny. It's like, yeah. But for them, it wasn't. This is a town where there's barely electricity. There's barely any running water. Not everybody has running water. And so it's out in the boonies. It's like a 2.5-hour drive from the biggest city there in Chiapas. And so it's up in the little mountain areas, or it's not necessarily mountains, it's more like hills. But Nuevo León, that's where it is. One day, some of the people or some of the men from the town went over while they were having Bible study in this little shack that they had borrowed from one of the families that was allowing them to start having Bible studies there. They tore it up. They tied him up to the basketball court, and they were getting ready to burn him up alive for preaching the gospel. And in their head, it was because he was planning on eating their children. And so they'd already poured gasoline and everything at his feet, and they were getting ready to light him up and the other guy up. Luckily, or as a blessing from God, there was a group of human rights that was going right through that town at that moment. They stopped it. They called the cops. The cops had to come over because the cops knew what was going on. They were just off somewhere else. So they had to come over, and they started putting people in jail. Our evangelist called my grandpa and said, "This just happened just right now. What do we do?" And grandpa said, "You talk to those 3 families that you have there and have them sell whatever they have and bail those people out of jail." And I'm thinking, Grandpa, why would you do that? You know, why would you want to bail those people who just try to kill you out of jail? Keep them in there, you know. You don't need them out here. And Aldo listened to what my grandpa said, and he went out. They sold whatever they could. They bailed those people out of jail, and now that's the biggest church that he has there in Chiapas. There are close to about 175, 180 people meeting every Sunday. And so that's really exciting to see how God has worked in his life that way. And I asked him, "Man, were you scared?" He's like, "Yeah, to be honest, I was. I was going to die, you know." And he was like, "Well, I knew that, like, the Lord was going to permit whatever to happen." So I had that kind of, comfort. But at the same time, I was thinking about my family and not being able to do stuff anymore. And I was like, "Man, that must have been tough." He's like, "Yeah, to be honest, it was." You know, and I'm just like amazed to be able to be even just part of his life in some shape or form, you know. And Aldo, he's a really tough looking guy. And the gospel has really changed the way he does things. He used to be very aggressive. "Oh, you want a piece of me?" He'd fight back right away. And now he's just the opposite. He's like, "Whatever." He's had other times when they've like arrested him for preaching the gospel, and he said, "They'll tie my hands up and they'll put me in the back of this truck, and by the time I'm getting ready to get out, my hands are untied." They're like, whatever they did, they didn't even know. Either God undid the knot, or they didn't know how to tie the knot. But the guards were surprised that I didn't try to flee. He's like, "Well, I don't have anything to be fleeing from. I'm not doing anything wrong." And so it's just really encouraging to see the work that they do and the way they work together there in Chiapas. Most of the brethren, they're not used to like hanging out and being with each other, but the different churches that they have, they'll get together once every 3 months to have a big worship service. And they'll come in from the different towns, and one town will host it, the other town will host it every 3 months, and it's been a great blessing for them to grow that way and to know and encourage each other, know that there's other people that believe the same thing that they do in different towns. Aldo, because there's so many places, or all these places have churches, and then he has like 4 more where they're just like home Bible studies yet. He has to circuit ride these at least 3 times a week. And so what he's done is he's trained members from the Tuxtla church to be able to preach and teach. And the youth there know how to play guitar. And so if you're a young person at the Tuxtla church, you better learn how to play guitar, because you're going to be sent out with one of the preachers at least 3 times a week. And so it's kind of cool to see them go. Hey, here's a preacher and his wife and a youth person going with a guitar. And they might just know like 3 songs, but those are the 3 songs they're going to play for worship at the church service where they go. And it's just kind of cool to see their system. And this is Aldo, and we'll go to the next slide. The next slide we have is Oaxaca, the state of Oaxaca. We have Rodolfo Jimenez. Rodolfo gets to circuit ride all the mountain areas in Oaxaca, or the section of mountain areas where he lives, because it's the whole Sierra. There's a Sierra that comes through there, and it's too big for him to cover everything. But the section where he's in, there's probably like 7 different congregations that he visits on a regular basis. But the main church there is Zaragoza. We have La Victoria, La Reforma, and Itunduja. Those are the ones that he gets to do most of the work there. Some of the other ones are just, again, home Bible studies. These are so up in the mountain that the mail doesn't even go up there. Like the Mexican Postal Service doesn't go up there. They ask him to take up letters if they need to be sent. And so what he realized is that when he turns in a piece of letter or an envelope from someone who sent it, he can slide in underneath that or with that a Bible correspondence packet. And so he'll leave that in people's homes, and that has helped him bring people to know Christ. And so what he'll do is he'll slip that in, they'll answer it, they'll go through the Bible study, and then they'll give it back to him thinking he's going to mail it, and he just goes back home, switches the next lesson, hands it over to them next time he comes in. And so that's another way, or that's one way that he ministers. He's probably the teddy bear of our group. He looks tough, but he's very soft. He's such a kind person. His heart is just very compassionate person. He's very calm. Usually when we get into any kind of arguments, he's the one that calms everybody down. And not by like, calm down, calm down. He's just like, okay, everybody, let's breathe in, let's breathe out. Okay, let's remember that we can agree to disagree, you know. But he gets to ride his motorcycle up. He lives actually in the valley with his family, in the valley of Oaxaca, in Putla. But he circuit rides all the mountain areas in his motorcycle. He has a dirt bike that he gets to ride up there. And sometimes even his dirt bike can't go up those roads. So he has to push his dirt bike through the ruts of the mud that has been caused when it's rainy season. He's sent me pictures where there's a big truck that went through and caused some ruts in the road. And he's like in one rut, and his motorcycle's in the other one, and he's pushing it. The mud is about a foot and a half deep. And so he's like pushing it through while he's walking on the other one. It's kind of funny to see all that stuff. But there's also a part when you're coming from the mountains going down to the other town called La Reforma, that the river joins the road. And these are all gravel or dirt roads. And so the river joins the road for like a block and a half. It's not a huge river. It's just about a foot of water goes through. And he has to drive through that every time in his motorcycle. And he says, I have these special boots and pants that I wear so I don't get wet. And one time I went up there, we were visiting, and I told him, hey, could I drive your motorcycle? He's like, sure. So I drove it down, and right when that river joins the road, I'm like, I don't know if I should do this or not. Well, what's the worst that could happen? And so I thought, oh, I don't have his special boots or his special pants on, you know. So I decided to ride through it with my feet up and just ride it through for a block and a half. And within like 3 seconds, my legs got tired, so I had to put them down. I was drenched in water that time. But Rodolfo gets to get muddy, get wet. Right now, one of the projects they have in Oaxaca is in La Victoria. It's a small church building that they have, and when I mean small, it's probably the width of one of these pews, and maybe like 10 pews back. That's their church building. And it's made out of wood because they have a lot of trees up there, so it's just raw wood. But the termites have already eaten it up quite a bit of times. And so they're thinking now that they're going to rebuild, they're going to make it out of concrete and put a tin roof on there and see what the termites can do with that. But right now, that's one of the projects that they're dealing with. Another thing that you guys could pray for is one of the elders from that church in Zaragoza was recently murdered with his wife. We don't know the reasons yet, but they were found murdered in their home, and that has been a real hard blow for Rodolfo as far as not being very encouraged with this situation. It's been a really difficult situation. Since he has to circuit ride, he has to leave people in charge, and so he'll know. And this was one of the leaders that he could count on with the different things in the church. And so he was okay with going to visit the other churches as long as he was there taking care of Zaragoza. And so now he doesn't have that, so we're praying for someone else to step up in the leadership that would be that right hand for him. Because as evangelists, since they do a lot of circuit riding the different churches, some Sundays they might be here, another Sunday they might be over there. And it might take 5 or 6 Sundays before they come back to this church. And so that's the way it is. And so if you guys could be praying for not only the family, but also the ministry there in Zaragoza because of the death of this leader in not only the community, but also in the church, we'd really appreciate that. And we'll go to the next slide. And I'll go a little faster on some of these other guys. Tacho is in the valley area of Oaxaca. Tacho is a real fun guy to be around. I tell people when I do presentations that Tacho is the guy that will eat anything that used to have life in it. So no matter what it is, he'll eat it. If you know how to cook it, you know how to prepare it, he'll eat it. There's a delicacy that they have in Oaxaca. They eat these ants that come out when it's the first rain of the rainy season. They come out right before the first rain, and they just swarm out from the ground. And they're about 1 inch long and about 1/4 inch round. And they taste like bacon. I still like bacon better. There's something about putting them little things in your mouth and chewing them. It's like something's not right there. I've had to have them. I have had to eat them just because we've taken groups up there on short-term mission trips. And in order to get them to do it, I have to pretend like I like them. And that way I get to see all of them try it out at least. So that's...
Are you going in December?
Right. Get ready for some ants. No, we don't have that in every area. They do bring me a bag of ants every now and then so I can have them as a delicacy. And they are a big delicacy. And so I try not to eat them all up at once. I do, however, like them. They make a special salsa with them. So it's all ground up into like this gravy shape. So you don't really see the ants or no. You just know that they're there or that they used to be there. I'm okay with that. So we have that. Tacho is a very energetic, very passionate guy. He also helps with Zafra, which is a family camp within the area of Oaxaca. At first, when they started this camp, they decided there was going to be like for youth. Well, the first year they had it, all the families would bring their kids and they'd stay around. But they only were prepared for the youth. And so the leaders got together, or Tacho and a bunch of the other ministers there, they said, well, we're going to have them sitting around. We might as well teach them. And so they started having that. So now it became a family camp. So every time there's camp, it's like everybody comes out. Grandma, grandpa, baby, everybody. And so they're all just camping out there. They have a couple dorms. And then if you have a tent or a tarp, you can go out there and sleep out there. And they'll feed you there. They'll take turns preparing the meals. They usually cook. They still cook with fire and like wood instead of stoves and gas. Most of the ladies up there in Oaxaca still know how to cook with wood, and they enjoy that a lot more. And I don't know what it is about cooking with wood, but food tastes a lot better. I really enjoy it when I get invited over there to go preach or teach or do something, and it's really encouraging to spend time with the Evangelists. And we'll go to the next slide. The next slide is in Puebla, the other Rodolfo. He's in Santa Clara, Xilotzingo, Huajuapan, and Puebla capital. Puebla is a very Catholic state. There's a Catholic church building for every day of the year there. And so we were just talking about fireworks in Mexico that sound like gunshots. And the reason that they sound like that is because they're huge, and they usually shoot those every time they're celebrating some kind of saint at the Catholic Church. And for example, in Texcoco, we probably have half of the year we have those fireworks going off, because each little church will have their saint, and they'll shoot fireworks the whole week at like 6 in the morning and just at random times during the day, at night. I mean, it's just pretty crazy. But he has a tough job to do there as far as evangelizing in the area. The way they minister is through counseling, and also through, they reach out into the community. They do a vacation Bible school every month, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or like a vacation Bible school setting every month in the different areas. So like if he's going to target Xilotzingo, they'll do that every month. They'll have a vacation Bible school where they'll have the kids come in, the parents stay. So they'll have a class or classes for the kids, and they'll have a class for the parents. And that's how they get going, and that's how they get started. Sometimes some of these parents are visiting, and they're like, well, we live about 40 minutes away. He'll go over there and start a Bible study in their home, which then they invite other people, and that's how our churches grow, is we start with one family, we ask that family to invite others to Bible study, and that Bible study, then people start growing, and then you look for a piece of land or a piece somewhere to rent, and that's where you start meeting. And that's how most of our churches got started, is just one family or one person inviting other people to come and do Bible study. And so Rodolfo and his wife do counseling, and they do vacation Bible school as far as their outreach into the community. We'll go to the next slide. And the next slide is my Uncle Kurt. He works in the church in La Magdalena, Michuca, which is where Grandpa is also. He teaches at seminars. If we need any kind of topic, we'll have him prepare that, and he'll teach it to our evangelists, or he will go and teach it in the area where our evangelists minister. So if there's, for example, one of his seminars that he teaches is on Jehovah's Witness, how to talk to them, how to help them grow closer to Christ, and he'll do that. And so he'll go into different towns where our evangelists are to train the people in the congregation on how to talk to Jehovah's Witness, or whatever is the theme that we would like him to teach. So we'll go to the next slide. The next slide is Grandpa. Grandpa is 90 years old. He's still doing okay for a 90-year-old. He still teaches some seminars, but when he does teach, his short-term memory is not so good. His long-term memory is perfect. And so we have to go with him now. So one of us usually has to travel with him. And he'll start teaching and get off track. You kind of have to remind him to get back on track. But once he's on track, he's good to go. And so he still wants to keep doing that. He's still writing some stuff, Bible studies. He does a lot of counseling. People will come to his house, and he'll help them with counseling. And he visits some churches. And we'll go to the next slide. The next slide is Jose. And if you remember that family that I told you, or the leader and his wife that were murdered in their home, it was his parents-in-law. His wife's parents are the ones that were murdered. Jose and Vicky work in La Magdalena, Tlipac, and in Los Reyes area. He's a professional translator, so he translates all our materials into Spanish. Any kind of material, if we find good Bible studies here, or a book, or whatever lesson, he'll usually translate, and we can get it to all our evangelists in Spanish, so that it's another tool that we can have. He's usually the one that translates for whenever anybody comes to teach from the U.S. He'll translate that, not only the material, but also translate live for us. So that's Jose, and the next one and last one is me. I have a goofy picture up there because this is what I use at camp. By the time I showed this presentation, all the kids already know me, and they know that that's a normal Adrian pose. So I get to do the church. I get to do the ministry at the church in Texcoco, which, like I said at the beginning, it's my hometown, and that's where we'll be. The group that's going to be going from here will be spending most of their time there. I get to visit the Evangelists, make sure that they're doing okay. I receive their reports. I put them together and send it up here so that we can do stuff. I do a lot of U.S. visits at camps, vacation Bible schools, presentations to churches, and conventions. Other than my grandpa, I'm the only one that can legally come up here and actually speak the language and know the people that I'm communicating with. I really feel like God has prepared us to continue the work there. We have a lot of good things happening. I know in the past there's been marvelous things going on, but I'm really excited to see what God has planned for us in the future. And so if you guys have any questions, this is a good time to ask questions. Yes?
Adrian, I just curious, you made a couple of references to the problems you've had. Is there any cooperation at all with the Catholic Church or conflict kind of?
Yeah, the Catholic Church sees us as an enemy, not as an ally. The Catholic Church, they don't consider themselves Christians. They would say that they're Catholics before they're Christians. They just don't understand that concept of Christianity. And so what I've noticed is that here in the States, Catholicism looks a lot more like Christianity than it does in Mexico. In Mexico, there's a lot of Catholicism adopted the traditions and the different rituals that the religious rituals that they already had back in whatever town they go into. For example, in Chiapas, one time we were visiting with a group. We went into this small building up in the mountains. It was a Catholic church, and so we walked in and to look around because there's amazing things that they've built and architectural and all that, and just for people to kind of get the culture of the Catholic Church. So we walked in, and at the entrance or at the front, like at the altar area, there was this lady with a baby and a black chicken. And this lady looked really evil. I mean, you could just sense the evil in her. And she was getting ready to do a live chicken sacrifice, probably for her baby there at the Catholic Church. And so Catholics believe in witchcraft. Actually, some parts of Catholicism are starting now. Within the past maybe 5 years, the new thing is to worship death. There's a Saint Death that they worship. And it's basically a little statue of you guys call the Grim Reaper. And they'll have a little Grim Reaper hanging on their necklace or T-shirts, or they'll tattoo themselves with that. I mean, it's really different. You have to be there and see it to realize the darkness there is. Another problem that we have with the Catholic Church, and the reason why they persecute us so much in some of these little towns, is because they actually own all the bars, the prostitution homes. I mean, it's not like it says the Catholic bar, but everybody knows that the Catholic priest or the Catholic Church owns that. And so when real Christianity comes in and sheds light on some of these issues, you don't cheat on your wife, don't go getting drunk, don't do this, well then that means less revenue for the church or for the Catholic Church. And so there's towns where my grandpa has a price on his head because of the transformation that has happened in that town. Has been bad business for the Catholic Church. It's also well known that the Catholic Church launders money of the drug cartels. So you'll go into this, you can drive 3 hours into the boonies and find this church that's probably 4 times bigger than this, with like a huge colonial look and real extremely nice. And people are living in huts. And you know that money to build that church was out of drug lord money. And so there's a lot of different things that are that are definitely not like what the Catholic Church is here in the U.S. So that's why I make such a bold statement, or I really like to emphasize that, because people think, oh, well, Mexico is a Catholic, 96% Catholic, so why should we go evangelize them? Because their Catholicism is not even close to what God wants as far as Christianity is concerned. So, any other questions? Yep.
We got about 5 minutes to circulate and everything before we start our service.
All right.